Katie, it's so good to see you
It's
again.
good to see you too.
I finished the book today.
Oh, you did?
I'll give you my takeaways. Before I got to tell you how it hit me emotionally. I started getting sad at the end, like so deeply connected to Yoshino-san. And that's how I wanted to call him, Yoshino-san. How long did it take you to start calling him by his first name?
It was like,
Welcome to the EBFC show, the easier, better for construction podcast. I'm your host, Felipe Engineer Manriquez. This show is all about the business of construction.
Today's episode is sponsored by the Lean Construction Institute. LCI is working to lead the building industry in transforming its practices and culture. Its vision is to create a healthy and thriving industry that delivers outstanding project outcomes every time for everyone. Check the show notes for more information. Thank you, LCI. Now, to the show.
Like almost 5 years, maybe 4 years. It was like halfway through our book project. It was a good 4 years at least. Yes, it still feels awkward to feel. It's strange because publicly I will not call him Isao. I did a few times at our book launch party. It definitely feels strange, but always Mr. Yoshino when I'm with him.
Mr.
Or Yoshino.
Yoshino.
I did call him Yoshino-san for a long time, but then it feels. But I call him Mr. Yoshino when we're together. Yeah, he said even a man that American whom he worked with in sort of the end of his career. When he was doing consulting work after the water ski boat experience, he always still calls him Yoshino-san, even though they're roughly the same age. And
what does John call him? That's what I want to know.
John Shook?
Yeah.
Oh, he calls him Isao to his face, one-on-one, but I think he calls him Yoshino-san or Kachao. Cacho. Yeah.
Cacho.
Cacho. Thank you. I know I talked to him last night. We ended up chatting for almost 90 minutes. We hadn't talked since for almost a month, which is a very long time. We usually talk every week or every 2 weeks, but we both had things going on, and it was just it was a little challenging to coordinate our times. And he's been busy working with some universities, so our schedules didn't align. So we had a nice catch up last night, and excited about some collaboration we're doing this year, this week and next week, and then some plans for next year too. So that was fun to explore.
And I'm dead serious, Katie. Your book has been so transformative. I can tell you right now that the way that I'm operating in my company with the work that I do, it's already different. It's already happened. Wow. It's already changed. And I'm in this Culture Academy group that's hosted by Procore. It's like a small little cohort of leaders in different parts of the construction industry from Florida all the way to California. And we were talking this morning, and we had to share like some wins and some losses. And I started with the bad news first, because that's the better way to start. Like all of these people spending this time together, it's not about just good job and kudos. The point of this group is so that we stretch ourselves and grow. And I had to start with failure, and it was tough. It was the first time I talked about the struggle that I've been having this year with anybody outside of my household. And it was very different for me.
How did that feel for you?
I felt vulnerable, for sure. Definitely vulnerable. And the people that were on the call are amazing people. And right away they were wanting to make sure that I was okay. And then they wanted more details. And I wasn't expecting that response. It took me by surprise, but I instantly felt better. I felt good.
It's amazing. It brings out the humanity. I do this all the time in virtual environments. It's the heart, but it's how we can connect with that heart and that humanity. And, that sense of vulnerability goes so far. Of course, having a supportive team and them welcoming your sharing and being vulnerable is also important. But if we put ourselves forward, it's amazing what happens, and the connections that establishes and breaks it breaks down the facades of what like we're supposed to be this certain way at work, because we are our whole selves.
Our whole self.
So yeah.
I totally agree, Katie. And I went back and I listened to the raw footage of our first part 1, and I realized that I didn't do a good job of letting you introduce yourself.
Oh,
we were so comfortable talking.
We went right back into it.
Yeah, I kept waiting. I was like, okay, when is it going to come?
Well, I thought you had some gems of what you were just saying. It really, I really appreciate hearing how the book has impacted people in a real and tangible way. My time with Mr. Yoshino has impacted me in such a positive, transformative way. And then to know how our collaboration and also what I've brought forward and how I've structured the book and presenting it so that it is in a usable, meaningful, reflective way that people can learn from is makes all the years of effort worthwhile. So,
well, Katie, it's worth telling you again that when I was reading the book, number one, it reads very well. The story that weaves through, I'll borrow your weaving metaphors as much as I can. It's such that like you don't want to stop reading it because you're on a cliffhanger. It's like watching a good movie, following along the story. You feel like the story has a happy ending just because I've seen pictures of you and Yoshino-san online, and he's always smiling so big.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking the story has a happy. And then when I'm in the book and in the second part of the book that I finished since the last time we talked, it was like I was feeling so bad for the experiences he had. Like when he came back to work in San Francisco for the first time and he realized what his job was, I felt crushed. Just like him. I was like, how could you do this to him, Toyota? I was so mad for him. Like I was angry. And then seeing him go through this and then having that realization that it's just the perspective is his own. And I've thought that, and I've said that myself so many times, and I still get caught in my own thinking. I get in my own way of getting back, getting some better perspective, taking the time to pause. And I want to make sure we really dive deeper into reflection with you. And I want to take advantage of your Japanese skills now that I know that you're an, what is that, N5 Japanese, N5 Japanese speaker. Definitely some hard questions I'm going to get you on, Katie.
All right. Well, I'm a little rusty since my planned trips to Japan this year didn't quite happen. So my Japanese practice is a little rusty, but happy to take a go.
Yeah, well, it'll be some things I think you're going to have easily in spades. And if you mess up and trip, then we'll both learn together.
Okay, good. Well, you can just edit it out too. So
I could, but I probably won't. So I'm so happy to have back Katie Anderson back on the podcast, author of Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, and definitely a lifelong student who never stops learning. Katie, please, I'm going to stop talking for just a second, give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thanks, Felipe. I'm so happy to be back here talking with you. It's always a pleasure. And I'm, as you said, Katie Anderson. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm a leadership coach, lean practitioner, author, and facilitator whose passion is for helping people learn to live and lead with intention and to always be learning more deeply for themselves, for the people they support and their organizations. And I had the great distinctive pleasure and honor of becoming friends with Mr. Isao Yoshino when I moved to Japan in 2015 with my family. And we became friends, and out of that friendship became a deep partnership and resulted in the book that you just finished reading. So I'm excited to talk with you more now about your experiences of finishing the book and your takeaways and some of the other, how it's had a meaningful impact for you, as you were already starting to share with me earlier.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie, again, for taking time to be with me in this evening in December. I'm super glad to have you back. Your book has been a game changer for me. We have a mutual friend, And that's how we talked about that on the show before a little bit, either on camera or off. I don't remember where it landed, but we definitely have some mutual friends that are like-minded. And I'm an admirer of what the Lean Enterprise Institute has done. And I know that you're still a faculty member there. And we didn't talk about that at all last time. Like I went back through all that. I was like, how did we not talk about that? We must have just ran out of time.
I have my fingers in many different pots, so that we can cover some other pots today.
Yeah, but I feel like, Katie, you're one of those people that I can just talk to you all day and night, and you definitely have lots of nuggets to share. And I'm going to pull some of those out of you. Is like, you want to get my reactions to your book, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions about the book.
Oh, fabulous. Well, I'm excited to talk with you too. You have one of the most soothing voices that I have encountered in a long time, and it's just your voice invites discussion and leaning in. So let's
thank
lean
you, Katie,
into the
for
conversation.
I appreciate that, Katie.
You're welcome.
But I want to start by, in part one of the book, it's pretty positive, like overall. And by the time we get to the second part, I see it really transitioning and pivoting. And I don't want to give the whole book away. If you're out there and you haven't picked up Katie's book, we're going to give you links in the description below, as well as when we promote the videos, for you to get after it and get that book. And it's available right now on Amazon Unlimited. So take advantage if you've got that membership. But otherwise, I'm getting a hardcover myself. I read it all in my Kindle. There it is. There it is.
You feel it in your hands. There's still something nice about that.
And you get the nice book smell. Like those of you that are old enough to appreciate a good non-digital book, it is something to behold in your hands and touch. And even like, I don't bookmark. I like to fold the dog ear, the corners.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh yes. Because that way I know, like, when I go back through it, because I read books multiple times, Katie. I'm not a one and done type of reader. Let's read this bad boy like 10, 15, 20, 30 times.
Well, you'll be excited to know I have a workbook coming out too very soon as a companion guide to the book, so you can dog ear and bookmark away and cross-reference and deepen your learning. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, I will definitely. And for those of you who don't know, Mr. Isao Yoshino is the Ken Sanderson character in Managing to Learn, the book by John Shook, where John Shook is Desi Porter. And there's a whole bunch of play on words there that I had no idea until Katie enlightened me, which was really awesome. I wish I had read your book first, but it just wasn't available yet, Katie.
It wasn't available. And I think that Mr. Yoshino was not so well known. Even as a leader at Toyota, he always was a more behind the scenes type of leader, working in operational support, organizational development types of roles. And so he was John Shook's boss's boss, and what was the one of the two people who taught him how to be a leader and a learner at Toyota using A3 thinking and so much more. And Mr. Yoshino just has such a wealth of knowledge, and through really pivotal times at Toyota's history, where they really, really were focusing with intention about how to be a more people-centered culture, rather not just a process-centered culture, but people-centered as well. And so much to learn from him. So I'm grateful for the experience for myself personally to have learned from him, and now for the honor to be able to share his stories broadly with the world, so many people like yourself and others have a chance to learn from him as well.
Yeah, no, thank you, Katie. There are powerful stories in there that, many times I was in his place in the story. You wrote it so well that I felt what he was feeling in the moments when he was feeling it. And all kinds of things that you would not expect in a leadership book, like anger, sadness, like hopelessness, all these things that a lot of leaders, I think, are facing, especially in challenging times like today. And then to see this trajectory of where he's so centered on what his purpose is.
Yes, heart and direction, sort of, it's intention. How do you align yourself with Shiko? How do you align yourself with your purpose and your values? And how do you really live and lead with intention? But you know what? One of the things I value so much from Mr. Yoshino is that he is real and he is relatable. And some of those stories were really hard for him to talk about as well, but he was willing to go there and willing to share that. And as we talk about in the book, and he shared with me, there's so much we can learn from mistakes and failure, but we have to be open to that and open to the self-reflection. Right. And it wasn't that, he's always been, some of those experiences, even as, they're told in more totality in the book, but some of those stories, especially the water ski boat experience, which was his biggest, as he calls it, his biggest career failure, was pieced together over years of conversations. And, I think one of the if nothing came of the book, if no one read it, I'm so glad people are reading it and having the chance to learn from him. But the experience of me being able to help him reflect both on the positive and the things that were more challenging, and maybe see things in a different light. And like that, he had this experience that felt really terrible. And he learned some things as well, but to now he's like, oh, I see things in a different light. I've had the opportunity to reflect and see things with a different perspective. And he had this like sense of levity later in talking about those experiences. And so if anything came out of that book, helping my friend reflect deeply and maybe helping shift in some ways some of his mindset around the challenging times. Although, as you know, he's amazing at having a very positive mindset and doing that for himself as well.
His mindset is admirable. So often you find people that they let their environment get the better of them, and it kind of takes them down. And I mean, he's not perfect, right? And many times he says, and as he's reflecting about things, he makes a change and says, like, today I decided, and he just doesn't decide, but he follows it quickly with action.
Yes.
And I think that's the part that a lot of us miss, especially in larger organizations and businesses. We miss that part. Like, now we know what to do. We've made the decision. It's time to do it.
It's time to do it. And sometimes even if we know we need to do something, we don't do it. And, that's, he acknowledges that for himself too. Like he taught senior leaders at Toyota, thousands of them, how to practice Hoshin Kanri strategy deployment. And when it came to his own challenging business, he felt like there are so many fires to put out and so much complexity that he didn't do it. And so, but that's so relatable. I mean, all of us have had those experiences where we're just so overwhelmed by what's going on that even though we know we should do something, we don't, because we just feel, we're just trying to cope. And so I think that's really just reassuring that no one's perfect, right? And that we can still make those changes and be intentional and continue to apply that knowledge forward, and don't beat ourselves up by the mistakes in the past, but how can we see them as a learning opportunity, and whether or not we can learn of ourselves and make the course corrections. He didn't have that same opportunity again, but now he's allowing us to learn from those experiences. And so it is still paying it forward and creating wisdom in all of us.
The questions you asked in the book through the Hansei, at the end of every chapter, Katie asks a series of questions to make you reflect. And one in the second half of the book that really got me, you asked me, I mean, anybody that reads it, not just me, but you asked me, how have you reflected? And it was like just a simple question of, what time have you made to reflect on what you learned? And my answer was, I didn't make the time. Like, I was so mad at myself reading the book, Katie. Like, I just had this epiphany as I'm reading the story and connecting to Yoshino-san's experiences. And outside of talking about it with my spouse at night, and I finally had a long conversation with my 10-year-old yesterday. He was having some 10-year-old kid struggles, and I was asking him about his intention and discovering that intention. And it's hard. It's hard. And I remember being a kid his age too, and it's tough. But you asked me, what time have you made to reflect? And I looked back at my calendar of work just last week, and it was just meeting after meeting after meeting. And there wasn't even 20 minutes in between where I can step back and just say, like, okay, I just spent time with these 30 people. What did I learn from that? What am I going to change? I went right on to just the next task. And I think that was, I would consider last week a missed opportunity, but the good news is I can still learn and apply that. I've baked in a little bit of buffer this week to give myself those moments that I otherwise would have just been oblivious to if you not have asked me that question. And you are a relentless question asker. I can tell.
I've honed my skills. I like to not think of it being relentless because it's challenge and nurture, right? But I have.
You can say challenge and nurture. I can say relentless to describe from my perspective, but it's a good thing because you can't read my mind.
It's also about asking questions that will help the other person. My purpose with those practicing Hansei questions, actually practicing Hansei was the working title of the book. I don't know if I told you that before, but this sort of the meta story or the meta theme of the book is about reflection and how reflection is the foundation of learning. It's so important and critical. And then asking questions either of ourselves or asking questions to help other people is so powerful in that practice of Hansei and reflection as well. And I was going to say something else about that, and now I went off on the tangent of Hansei. So there you go. Oh, but Mr. Yoshino said that it was said the same thing, not about. I think he framed it differently, but it was sort of relentless questions, but relentless in a way of caring. So it wasn't like barrage of question, but I just kept coming back with a deep curiosity to understand what was going on, especially around that last last decade of his life. He just hadn't gone into very much detail, and I was trying to understand what had happened, and so that's where the questions kept coming. But it wasn't always like we're going to ask 20 questions and you can't leave until you answer them. So
you don't have a number of questions.
Sorry, we're talking for each other.
We're both excited. Go ahead, Katie.
No. That's what I've had to learn is like I get very excited. And so one of the things I've had to practice with intention is how to retain my energy and my enthusiasm and my excitement, but also calm down and slow down so that I don't interrupt people, especially after I've asked them a question or that I allow space for other people to talk too. And that's all part of our own self-awareness about how, what's important to us, who do we want to be, how do we want to show up? And then what are the habits that either align with that or sometimes get in our way with that? And how do we amplify those things? Like I became a really good question asker, but that's only so good if I was jumping in and not giving people space to think and answer. So it's an endless journey, but I think I'm a better person than I was 10 years ago. That's for sure, because of I've put deliberate practice towards that. Not that I'm a bad person. I just think I've become a more intentional and effective a person in all aspects of my life, but that's what comes with age and and experience.
That's actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because I was looking at your profile and I saw that you had made like a shift. You left a traditional type of work and you went into the very scary consulting realm for whatever reason. I couldn't tell in anything that I've read, Katie, that really said what was the impetus for that shift. I did see the acknowledgement in the book where you thanked a couple of key people and some people that I admire too, that you've had in your life. I mean, just you got cool people all around you, number one. So kudos to you for that. But could you talk about, because I've had a couple friends recently, and I have a friend right now that's actually going to quit their day job and go full time into something else. And he's talked to me about it a lot. And he's just like, was very sure of it. And he'd made the decision a year ago. And here we are going into month 12 and he hasn't made the transition yet. The decision's been made, everything's set up, but he hasn't left the day job yet. What can you tell us about your experience with that? Because I know he's going to be listening to the show. I'm not going to call him out by name, but I will poke him privately to make sure that he gets this exact spot.
This one's for you. I've been thinking about my sort of looking backwards in my career journey and sort of those pivotal points of decision points and changes. If we go back to that weaving metaphor that we started talking about, that warp and weft, like what are the constants that really have pulled us through? And then what are the things we've learned and adjusted along the way? And for me, looking back, there's some really strong constants, which is I've always been drawn to: learning, connecting with people, helping. But there have been different career choices I've made that some fit better aspects of that than others. And so I started off my career in academia, actually. Where you're supposed to be the expert problem solver, the knower of everything, the researcher, the finder of truth. And I love that from a learning perspective. Actually, the first 10 years of my career was spent in academic roles, including my master's degree and some other things. But for me, I've made a few pivots in my life, and I think it's gotten me to where I am now. And I feel like I'm in maybe my sweet spot, but it's taken 25 years of a career to get here, or maybe not quite 25, but almost there. My first career shift was from academia into consulting, not my own consulting practice, but I went and worked for a consulting firm. I was living in Australia at the time. That's where I'd done my master's degree, and I stayed there another few years. And it was a nice transition for me. What wasn't working for me about academia was that the type of research I was doing, twofold. The type of research I was doing, while very impactful and important, was all retrospective. And I didn't feel that I didn't feel as much of a tangible connection to the change I was impacting. And the second is I could go for days without talking to someone. And as you might gather here, I like to connect with people.
That seems like torture.
This is but I also loved it from a deep learning perspective. And in many ways, writing this book was like pulling back on that, on that interest in research and writing and synthesis and all of that. So there's something that was appealing in the book writing about that. But I love the most going to conferences and connecting with people and sharing and knowledge, not necessarily the sitting and analyzing. Anyhow, so I made a shift. And so that was a nice shift for me. I also decided 2 years later to move back to the United States. And at that point it was an opportunity to decide, do I want to work for a company where I was going to be traveling a lot or be more focused in one area? And I decided I took a few months and figured things out, but I took a role at Stanford Children's Hospital. And again, serendipity, it was using my consulting skills, but as an internal consultant. And I was at Stanford Children's for almost 6 years. And that's where I started learning and practicing lean. And I loved it. I loved the connection to people and the problem solving. And I then took another role at the Palo Alto Medical Foundation in a more senior lean consultant role and managing a team of people. And I, through that time, really realized that my expert problem solving skills no longer served my purpose in a people development role, either as a consultant, a coach, or managing a team of people. I mean, of course, it served me well in terms of I had problems in scope of responsibility that I needed to solve, but me jumping in and trying to do it all myself in that same way wasn't, or giving all the answers, and I wasn't being as effective. And that's really where I started to put that great intention, asking more questions, listening, slowing down and not being as excitable at all times. And then from there, I made the big, leap into the unknown and started my own consulting practice. And there were a few factors there that aligned in my life to make that the right decision. But I certainly didn't know what that was going to be. It wasn't like it was all set and lined up. In fact, it was a leap into the unknown. And it was the most rewarding leap I've made professionally. And it goes back to having connections and relationships built. And I had contracts already in negotiation before my last official day of work. And so that was super, super rewarding. And I was pregnant with my second child at that time. And it was like, I have to say that my second pregnancy was way more chill than my first because I had a lot more control. And then with serendipity, we moved to Japan a year later for my husband's job, and what could be a more perfect location for a student of the Toyota production system and than that. And so the rest evolved to what you now know. But life isn't linear, right? And so you have to I think that's where that concept of the warp and the weft, the warp threads, those sort of that sense of purpose, the things that are known within you, how do we follow those warp threads, those sense of constant, so they keep us on track and move us forward? But how do we also then incorporate in other elements and sort of then weave something that we couldn't have anticipated in the beginning? I certainly by no means, when I graduated from university, would think that I am a leadership coach and process improvement world. Yet looking back, it totally makes sense because the things that were still important to me then, I'm still fulfilling through what I'm doing now. So I don't know if that helps or not with your friend, but I say, make the leap, make it happen. You never know.
There you go.
There's no guarantees, but you won't know until you do it. So
You heard it here. So I'll make sure that he gets that message.
all
And
right.
in the book, Katie, you also do a good job speaking through Yoshino's son's eyes when he's talking about, you don't know how it's all going to weave together. And at times when you're looking at the threads and you see all these like dark and sad colors, these dark grays, the dark blues, the black threads. And if you zoom back a little bit and change your perspective, which doesn't happen unless you reflect, you can't reflect as you're weaving the thread. It's right at your hands.
Right.
It's right at your face.
You're in it.
You're in it. But it's like you beautifully said in the book, when you stand back and change your perspective on it, it makes sense. Just like you just did now, looking backwards, you leaped into the unknown and everything worked out better. Like you said, your pregnancy was better. Then you had opportunity to go to Japan. It was a no-brainer, easier decision. And your excitement, I think, has stayed high the whole time. You've stayed true to yourself. And I think it's even worth saying, like when you were younger, and I just heard you say now that you paused when you were in Australia, you paused and you said you used like 2 months. I think I heard you say 2 months of thinking about where you're going to go next. And then you moved. But you did. You kept moving. So I think that's like really powerful. I can't share any cool stories where I paused long enough. I'm more of a like just jumping and just crossing my fingers and hoping it's going to be okay. Which definitely makes for an interesting life.
Yeah,
But,
a lot of unexpected jumps, I'm sure.
There have been a lot of jumps. But luckily, we're here to talk about you and not me.
All right, it's time. Turn the tables. I want to learn.
I'm going to turn the table. But Katie, you were on a podcast that was published, I think it was a week ago or the week after. You were on a quality podcast. And I made a comment. I was excited to hear, it was a totally different way. Like that style of show, it was also, I think, about an hour long. And I commented that I liked listening to it and I was learning some things. And at that point, I was probably like 70% through the book. And you asked me right away when I commented, like, what are your key takeaways? And I was like, I actually paused and I thought about what they were. And I gave you the 3. And you came back right away and said, those are the 3 main parts of the story, which I can't wait to hear Yoshino say in his own words, how those 3 things are so critical. And I'll let you give away what those 3 things are because you'll say it better than I will. What are those 3 things that I shared with you, Katie? Do you remember?
Well, I believe that they're the 3 fundamental ways that a leader fulfills his or her purpose, which is set the direction, provide support to their people, and develop themselves. And those are, that really came out of something that Mr. Yoshino said on stage, actually just the same day I met him, probably. It was on stage with John Shook at a conference. This is 6 months before I moved to Japan. And he was talking about his role as a manager. And he basically said, my role as a manager was to give a mission or target, support my person while he or she, well, always mainly he back then, achieving the target. And then I was aware that as I was developing the other person, I was developing myself at the same time. And I was like, that is so incredibly profound and simple. And the essence of what leadership is, if we are people-centered and we're creating a learning culture, if we know the direction we need to go, we have a challenge that might push us into, thinking of things in a different way. And yet we're being given the support and nurturing and development and the systems we need to be successful. And then the leader's also working on how to improve himself or herself at the same time. Well, that's it. And it's so simple. And yet, there's so much complexity within that. But yeah, set direction, provide support, develop yourself. You got it.
Yeah, each one of those is a library of books and experiences in those 3 steps. It is really deep. And I got to, give a critical eye to John Shook. It didn't come out in his book, Managing to Learn, so much as it did here. I felt like, there when he wrote that, where we were culturally with what was coming out of Toyota, and as we understand lean today in the US. I just saw a slide yesterday, somebody say that lean is an American invention. it's not something from Toyota. And it's just, I had to think about that for a second. I was like, that's totally right.
It's totally right.
Yeah, it's totally right. We can blame your friends at the LEI for that word.
Well, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the word, but yeah, I heard Jim Womack a few years ago at a conference talk about that. One of the other words they were looking at was fragile. So I don't know if we want fragile systems either. So, it was a best attempt at describing it, and it describes certainly many aspects. But you can't. If you go to Japan, no one knows what you're talking about when you talk about lean.
Right.
It's a construct we've put to try and describe something, and even the Toyota production system has evolved, or the Toyota way has evolved since those researchers were really looking at Toyota in the 80s and 90s, and so even their systems and structures might look different than how it was documented. So I always have to. So I think I take people to Japan in non-pandemic times to go learn about the Toyota production system and what we call lean at the source, and and I have to remind people that sometimes our constructs of what lean looks like or what it's called is not what you're going to see or the words that are going to be used. But if we can get to principles, we see principles, we experience principles, we see embodiment of them in different artifacts, but to go back to what's the purpose rather than what's the actual tool or what something looks like.
Yeah, I really, really like that and appreciate that. And there's a similarity. There's a lot of similarities between your approach with your Japan tours and what Yoshino-san did when he took people from the NUMI plant as they were developing that training program for how are they going to get American people in the worst performing plant in GM's portfolio and became the best performing plant ever. And as he was brainstorming with his boss at the time, it was really interesting that they had that epiphany, that brilliance of they're not going to get it from us talking about it. They need to just come and immerse themselves in it, which is what you've always done as you've traveled. You've immersed yourself in all these different cultures and really expanded your horizon to such new heights. And I think that, for those of you listening, if you ever get the chance to go and experience something, be in it is completely different than reading about it. And I think that was really brilliant. Now I have to ask you as a follow-up to pull the next thread, Katie.
All right.
When you do your tours to Japan, do you make the people that you take with you put down in paper what their intentions are to get out of the trip before they go?
Yes. We start the day off. We start the day one off with setting some learning intentions and getting to know each other, and questions people want to answer for themselves through the experience. So yeah,
that is awesome.
And then we end with reflection, and of course, lots of celebration as well. So
lots of
fun cultural experience.
Lots of sake.
If you want, you can imbibe. I'd planned for this year, and we will next year, hopefully, go to a sake brewery company, a small brewery in the Nagano mountains that's close to this company called Ina, which actually Mr. Akio Toyoda considers the former chairman of this company to be his sensei and mentor.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a subsidiary of this company, but I was all very excited to line all that up, but pandemics get in the way of so much, but it's all right. I mean, healthy and safe is first and foremost, right. And we can travel again later.
No, that was really cool to see and to hear you doing that, and taking people back and watching what that did and how people transformed. I was on a call with some folks that have like mixed teams across the country. And one of the teams has union workers and all the other teams don't. And in California, it was the same thing. Like that in the book, and people were asking Toyota, like, why didn't you just copy what your competitors did? And you said it so brilliantly in Yoshino's words about they had to learn their lesson. Like that learning by going the easy way to non-union areas and setting up, that already been done. And they didn't want to just go the easy path. They wanted to have this real empirical experience and try something different and make a differentiation, which I think a lot of people don't take those types of risks. For as conservative as people think of Japan and Toyota, I would not have picked California to come into first. Like if if it was up to me by myself, it's not the easiest place to do work in.
No, and well, in fact, their competitors, Nissan and Honda, chose other places, as you mentioned. So it gets back to the comment that I start the book off with, Mr. Yoshino saying that the only secret to Toyota is its attitude towards learning, and that example, relates back to that quote. They were intentional about choosing a complex environment because they knew they could learn more because of the challenges it would present. And if they were successful there, they were more likely to be successful elsewhere too. And they were slower to get started. Honda and Nissan also, they started earlier. In some ways, Mr. Yoshino believes that it was because Toyota wanted to also see and learn from their competitors' experiences. So he often remarks how sometimes people say that Toyota seems very slow at making decisions. And sometimes that can have negative repercussions, of course, but it gets back again to that concept of they're wanting to be deliberate in their learning. But then slow to decision, but quick to action. So,
Right.
so once they make that decision, away they go.
They're definitely never being accused of analysis paralysis.
Well,
never.
Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. They make things go. Although sometimes, can be slow to action at times has not benefited them. But I'll save that for you to ask Mr. Yoshino at our upcoming session.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's some pointed questions I'm going to ask him about key fobs in particular. Like I was watching the evolution of the wireless key fob at Toyota lagged like almost a decade behind the competitors, but I'm going to save that for him to put him on the spot.
Sometimes he's not able to answer questions unless they're directly about his own experiences. So just a warning.
I'll phrase it in a way that'll be people centric. I know how to play the game, Katie.
Okay. All right. We'll see. We'll see. I may have to translate.
For him, I've got 1,000 questions about Conpro that I'm already getting ready and formulating in my mind.
Okay, great. Well, I will. I'm excited to hear what they are. It's always intriguing for me. That was one of the challenges about the book. So, for example, what you called the Conpro was this 2-year-long leadership development immersive leadership development program that Toyota created for its top 1,000 senior managers and directors. And Mr. Yoshino is one of a small team sort of supporting the program. And there's so much inside there. And like, if I was going more of the technical route with this book, that we could have gone like way deeper into some of the elements, but I had to balance also like telling the story and keeping the momentum going along. And maybe there'll be another book about Conpro, but at least it highlights to me the sort of the essence and the most important elements about it. And Mr. Yoshino has gone and talked to his mentor, who was his boss at the time, Mr. Segura, and he was telling him some new memories that Mr. Yoshino hadn't been privy to, those discussions about the top executives deciding which parts of the organization were going to be involved in the leadership program. And it's a great story too about we all own quality. And so we all need to be part of this. It's not just the manufacturing side of things, it's everything. All parts of a company are responsible for quality, for safety, for basically what we create for our customers. And that's
some of the
important,
the early cross-functional thinking I saw, because I consider myself an agilist and love that Toyota is now adopting that as well, as we've learned and shifted, and the world is changing again, and they're going that way. But I was kind of surprised, Katie, and maybe you talked about it with Yoshino-san. It's not in the book, but why was Conpro like a 2 years and done? Because I've heard from a lot of people that said that the hardest thing, I can't remember the name of the gentleman now who's got like a 200-person team at Toyota, and I've heard it many different times. I think even Mr. Cho has said the hardest thing for Toyota to do is to pass on their culture to the next generation of leaders. Why didn't it like continue in a different way? It seemed like it was like, all right, we did it. We got these people done.
Yeah.
They're going to keep doing it. And then they backed away from it. And then they shifted. The chaos and entropy are always coming into your system. If you're not intentional, creating those environments where, you have some good failures to create a cause, to get people, to get an executive to say, like, we're going to go to this thing too. It's that important that we need to know, because we're going to be talking to our key leaders differently. What can you say about that, Katie? I feel like you know something.
I have my own take or hypothesis based on my conversations with him. Twofold. One is that it was a 2-year program, and that was intentional. You know, we talk about it in the book that his boss thought 3 years would sort of be too long. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
I like that.
so, you know, people are also moving on to different roles. But 1 year would be too short because enough people could kind of fake it, but not really be in it. And so 2 years is long enough to be like, all right, we got to keep practicing. You're really serious. You want us to do our, you know, our leadership, our Conpro A3, and do that. But the program was meant to be, as Yoshino-san says, a retightening, an intentional retightening of the belt, a reinvestment in the leadership mindset that Toyota wanted to create as a culture. And so, you know, in the 1960s, they had a real focus on quality control and quality circles. They won the Deming Prize in the mid 60s, around the time Mr. Yoshino joined Toyota. And then, you know, at the end of the late 70s, early 80s, you know, there'd been some generational you know, changes, and things had shifted. And so they retightened the belt. And again, if you think about 20 years later, Toyota retightened the belt with the publication of the Toyota Way 2001 that came from Mr. Cho. And then now we're about 20 years later again, and Akio Toyoda is out there retightening the belt again, really re-emphasizing what Toyota's purpose is, their mission about creating happiness. And he is going out and leading leadership programs in the organization. This is the president. There's some great articles. I don't know if you've seen them from the, I think the Toyota Way Times. I forget the exact name, but of what Mr. Akio Toyoda is doing right now, and some things he said about going back to basics. We need to go back to the basics. What did we mean by that? What the purpose and the intention behind the Toyota production system? What are our pillars? What does that mean? What are our management and leadership responsibilities of the Toyota Way? So the first is that there was, you know, they kind of always have to be intentionally retightening the belt, but you can't have that same offline focus all the time. And so, you know, this 2-year program and these tightening of the belt times allow us to have some more offline learning time. And then the rest is the expectation that it happens through the work. Leaders now are expected to be coaching and developing and mentoring their people. And now they have the skills to do that, and then probably sort of erodes a little bit. So we got to re-emphasize that again. But if we always have learning happening because of their sort of offline programs, or, you know, we're not really embedding it into our culture, into our work. And so I would imagine his answer would be, it's because it's become part of the work, and we occasionally have to retighten our belt, and then we continue on. We have that habit again, and then we need to retighten our belt again. So that would be my... But I might anticipate, but I'll be very curious what he says in his words as well.
Yeah. No, I love it, and how you tied it to the time too. It's like, it's connected to the generations of leadership that's happening inside the company. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting to see. And and it is kind of, I mean, we're seeing that now in the United States, where we've got multiple generations working, and there's an exodus of the baby boomers leaving in very large numbers, and the culture of the workplace is very dynamic right now. It's very hard to say, like, what kind of culture do we have today in any given company where you've got, you know, multiple generations of people in. It's not like just everybody's, you know, around the same type of experience. Like, even just looking at pictures. And I love that John let you guys have so many pictures to put into the book.
Thank God for John Shook for sharing pictures, because Mr. Yoshino has none except that one with John Denver, which I did, you know, and then there's more that you can go on the website, but I did include the John Denver photo in the book too. No, it's great. He has no photos, which is really sad. You know,
that's wild.
As we're talking, Felipe, I was thinking about how, or a few months ago, actually, Toyota headquarters in the United States chose the book to be their book club of the month book, which was super.
Hey, that's awesome, Katie.
And so I joined them for their discussion, and they were saying the same thing around this retightening of the belt, that they felt like this book was helping them have renewed appreciation for the fundamentals of the culture that they're supposed to be working in. And some of them were new hires in the last few years, and we're giving them new insights to that culture. And so I thought that was really cool as well, that, Toyota itself was using the book to learn about itself and its history and culture.
It's amazing. And there's definitely some gems in there that are nowhere else. Even in the way that Jeff Leiker did the Toyota Way, the seminal book before,
Right.
it kind of brought it to the mainstream. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Jim Womack and The Machine. I mean, that book deserves its own podcast all by itself, and probably like podcast several interviews. But there's definitely a difference between, what Jeffrey Leiker did and what you did. You came in really tight with Yoshino's perspective, but I think for me, I'm really big on context and history. Like it fed me so much more to understand, like, why would he do this? Why would he feel this way? Why would Toyota act like that? All those questions that I've always had, through your book and through his experiences, I got answers finally.
Yeah. Well, me too. I mean, that was my experience with talking with Mr. Yoshino and living in Japan, but really through the experience of learning from Mr. Yoshino, it gave me a richness of understanding. And so I thought that was important too, those contextual elements about, the regional culture and where Toyota is based, and some a little bit of the Japanese history provides context into this, because we're based in a certain time and a certain place, and that shapes who we are and our mindset as well. And it doesn't mean we can't apply principles in different settings, but it helps understand where something came from, or maybe what the things that were more easy and the things that were more challenging as well. So yeah, absolutely. And so I was talking to this another book club about the book too, and someone asked me the question why I hadn't included certain elements of Japanese history in it, and I said, I had the sort of box, this could be huge if I wasn't trying to write a whole book about the totality of Japanese or Toyota history, but really through the lens of Mr. Yoshino and some of my experience of context to help shape that story. But, what were the things that really stood out to him that were important in telling his story, his experience of working at Toyota? And then how can we use that as one person's learning experience? But he really feels like it also represents many people's experience from his generation of Toyota as well. So he doesn't like to say this is like one person's story, but that's him being humble, because he's also a pretty amazing person who has so much to offer from his personal individual experiences. Yeah.
No, it's definitely, I can't say enough great things about the book, and hearing the Toyota studying the book themselves is just, I think that's what they call fractal. That's like, that's the universe studying itself by watching itself somehow. Yeah. That's really cool, Katie. I'm so glad that that's happening.
Thank you. It's been exciting. And things I appreciate about being on podcasts like this is talking to amazing hosts like you and enjoyable conversations, but also I should say, the opportunity to connect with a wider audience who may not have immediately known about the book because of just knowing me or being associated with folks who would know Mr. Yoshino. And I really, as you've said, there's so much richness of learning from his story, and not just about those for people who are, interested in Toyota or lean or the things coming out of that, but just like how to be a good, thoughtful human being who's in support of developing other people. And actually, a friend of mine read the book, and she's just a friend. She's not working a business person at all. And she's like, I learned so much about parenting. And I said, it's the same thing. It's about developing people. You can do the same things about parents, set direction, provide support. Gosh, I have to improve myself, because I have an almost 9-year-old or almost 10-year-old as well. And we got to always be improving ourselves to be effective parents. So
got to walk the talk.
Yeah. Good. Well, I hope he's enjoying his Daruma and set his goal. I sent those to you.
I've got them right here. Can you see them?
No, there they are. They're hidden.
Yeah.
Your name Felipe was kind of hiding them. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, they're right there. He spends every morning, we do a reflection to start the day here we call it coffee talk. He doesn't drink coffee. I do.
Yeah, well, that's important.
Yeah. So they're here because it's then so he sits in the chair that's over here and then he can see them. And then we talk about different things. And I always ask him reflective questions, which even today, Katie, he finds annoying.
Yeah, well,
but it
of course, you're a
stop me.
parent.
Exactly. I know my role.
Later he'll appreciate that because you.
But I want to pull that string, Katie, because you just gave me something that I wanted to ask you right when we first started, and now it's a perfect reminder. So in the two pillars of the Toyota production system, we have the very haphazard English translation. I think only because we don't have enough context in the Japanese language. For those that are like lean nerds and you're into this, you're going to get a kick out of this. The translation of respect for people and continuous improvement are not good. And I want to just focus on the respect for people part. So in the book, you said several times, you said in the beginning, and then you brought me home at the end talking about, and Yoshino says, talking about the omission of the word wisdom. Can you tell for everybody, like the 99% of the people that don't know, what is the translation like? What's the word? What are the words in Japan? The Japanese words, and then
I have to pull my book out to remember the Japanese words. But yes, we'll go there.
Yeah, we'll go. Yeah, you go ahead.
And
pull the book.
And actually, and this is unprompted. I didn't know we were going to do this, but this is great. So there are two things. So there's the Toyota production system, which has the pillars of just in time and built-in quality, and then this is about the Toyota way, which was codified in 2001. But respect for so we're talking. There's respect for people and then continuous improvement, and this was actually pointed out to me by Michel Baudin. He's another lean author, and he lived in Japan for many years, and he's fluent in Japanese. And he had the question that he saw that the kanji characters in the Toyota Way 2001 up on Mr. Yoshino's slide said wisdom and kaizen. So chie to kaizen. Actually, I didn't need to look that up, did I? I was thinking about the respect for people. I didn't know the word for humanity, but I know the chie to kaizen. So to means two. And to means and so, but we've just translated, or they just translated the word kaizen as continuous improvement, and we left off the whole, or this is the Toyota's translation into English from the wisdom aspect, and to me that really we lost some nuance in there, because wisdom has a sense of gravitas, of generational learning, of reflection, of a continuous improvement. To me is just like, okay, we're going to keep going. Yes, we want to keep continuously improving, but wisdom is like the collective knowledge of how we continuously improve and what we're going to do in action in the future. And then so it was left off, and so but it's understood at Toyota as just how it is. The chie to kaizen is the same. It's all together, but we just call it kaizen. And and so it goes back to, again, the only secret to Toyota is its attitude towards learning, and it's about creating wisdom not just in ourselves but in others and for our organization across generations. And so that's their secret, and they certainly do it better. Toyota does it better than almost any company I'm aware of. There's certainly others who are effective at it as well, but how do we create wisdom?
The respect for people part, which in your book you love, you just perfectly talk about. It's not just the person individual, it's better said the humanity part. And that's where I wanted you to give me the Japanese on that side of the pillar in the Toyota Way, if you'll be so kind. Now that I've clarified.
Yeah, well, right. So then I don't remember the word for respect for humanity, but here we are. So respect for people, it's oh, great. We don't even have it. Oh, so I was like, do I have it just in kanji here? Because I will not be able to read that. But the first word is sonkei, which means, valued and worship. So it means one has a high regard for somebody. But the other, and then when sonkei is expressed, it means that the person puts himself at a lower position than the other person. So I respect you because you have seniority, you're my grandma, you're my teacher, you're my boss. But the other word is soncho, which is more commonly means, it talks about humanity or respect for people, not just respect for person because of the status. It's almost one's like respect for status, and the other, the soncho, is respect for, oh, I love this phrase in here, it means holding precious what it is to be human. So, I mean, how do we
There it is, Katie.
hold precious for what it means to be human? That is so different than just I respect you because you have status, and that's a huge difference of the nuance there. So with that,
that's what I wanted.
Yeah, fabulous. And I'm thrilled. And I was talking to Mr. Yoshino last night, and just we're looking back, we're reflecting together on just what the unexpected elements that happened in 2020 for all of us, but also really the great joy and wonderful things that came out of it, especially with the book and our collaboration, and how that's also bringing opportunity for us both. But what gives us both most joy is connecting with other people, helping each other learn, and helping others learn and develop as well. So thank you for being part of that too, Felipe. And I'm excited to keep learning and talking together.
Yeah. Likewise, Katie. I know I'm gonna have to have you back again, because I still feel like there's more strings to pull without giving the book away.
Oh, well,
that we can talk about.
All right, I have to tell one more story, because we've talked so much. You were talking about how you really enjoyed the book and the how it was written and the stories, and you felt like you were on a cliffhanger sometimes. So Mr. Yoshino, we were in the final editing stage, and he's read every word of the book multiple times. And he was saying he was getting caught up in the book, in the story. And he's like laughing at himself, because he's like, I couldn't put the book down. I was so caught up in the story. But he was laughing because he's like, it's my story. I know how it ends. Like, but I was enjoying reading it. Like, he was having this like meta, like he's like reading it as if it were, fiction or someone else's story, but it was his story. Anyway, he was laughing about that. And I said, well, that bodes well, that if you're like forgetting that it's your own story and just enjoying the reading it as a story or experiencing it as a story, that means that we did something right. So
you definitely
there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
But so there you go. Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you later this week. And I am excited for hearing what your audience, what resonates from our conversation with your audience, and what questions they have. I always welcome questions and feedback and people reaching out. kbjanderson.com, and I know you're going to put all of that information in the notes, and so please reach out and please share with us what stood out to you or resonated to you after listening to this. So
it's perfect. That was my improvement from the first interview to this one, Katie.
All right.
Is to ask everybody, if you're listening, give us some comments so that we can react to it. What did you like about this, and what stood out to you? Definitely, we encourage that.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you so much, Katie, for your time.
You.
I will talk to you again very soon.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you.
Very special thanks to my guest. I'm Felipe Engineer Manriquez. The EBFC show is created by Felipe and produced by a passion to build easier and better. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. Let's go build.